if your game is not clippable in 2026, you're going to miss out on a lot of distribution. And you should take this as seriously as you're like playtesting. There are people who are going to truly optimize their games for these channels, and they're going to outperform. You've got to give it the attention it deserves.
Hello and welcome to the Game Launch Podcast, where we interview some of gaming's biggest founders and CEOs about some of the most iconic works in launching games that you've played or at the very least heard of. I'm Robbie Ferguson, your host, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Justin Waldron. Justin is one of the most significant figures in gaming and is probably responsible for half the games on your phone today. Justin helped co-found Zynga at 19 years old. He helped create some of the biggest titles at the time, Zynga Poker, FarmVille, and by 23, just 4 years later, helped build the company into a roughly $10 billion IPO. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, Justin. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'll start with the most important question, which is, how did you get into gaming and how did you start Zynga in the first place?
Yeah, it's a long story, I guess. But really, I've been fascinated by games since I was a kid, just like most people growing up. Had tons of exposure to playing games with family and friends and always wanted to make games. And it was challenging to do, right? Like when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, you needed a dev kit for PlayStation. You needed to somehow get in touch with Sony and sort of on the other side of the world in Japan. And it just seemed like this dream, almost an impossibility to have access to these things. Sort of like something that I could almost barely not even imagine being able to do someday. So I kind of always took the opportunity to work on things where I could, making games for the calculator. I was reverse engineering a lot of games that didn't require a dev kit, but I could modify my favorite games. I got into programming because my mom was in IT, so I had access to programming software.
Were you building for mobile at this time? Was this a different device?
Yeah, mobile was flip phones when I was a kid. Right. So
yes. Not
really. It was like Java apps or something. I was spending a lot of time. Wow, earliest days was like literally the web was probably where I was spending the most of my time on social platforms like MySpace or other places, like literally writing widgets that could be used across these sites. Even before they had APIs, you could kind of copy and paste code across MySpace. Yep. I wrote bots for AOL Instant Messenger, which is kind of funny how some of this stuff is like, I'm still working on social platforms today. But there was no official APIs, but people had reverse engineered the DLLs for AOL Instant Messenger, and you could go and write like Visual Basic.
And this is before rate limiting and like all sorts of preventing mechanisms from today. Yeah, but the big thing was like building things that people could use frictionlessly. So what got me into game development was the idea that like it's about people. And then what I was so excited about using these social platforms and services, like whether it be AOL Instant Messenger or social networks like MySpace and later Facebook and others, is just the idea that like these are spaces where people were interacting with each other, and games were just a much more interesting way of interacting with your friends. And having come online during the age of like the golden age of the first wave of multiplayer games like Counter-Strike and StarCraft and these types of games, it became very apparent that like in some way the people who were playing those games were kind of living in the future, right? We were playing games like Counter-Strike, and it felt like it was years ahead of like the interactions average people were stuck on in the way they were using the web. And a big part of Zynga was like just simply identifying that playing games with people was something that everybody would like, and then figuring out what types of games it would be and how to make it accessible enough to actually use for normal everyday people, and a business model that would actually like allow it to get to them. So kind of obvious, like the founding idea of the company was just, people want to play games with their friends. It's way too hard right now. How do we make it instant? No downloads. How do we make it free? And then we just kind of followed that thread. And talk me through. So you're 18, you're 19 years old. Have you built a game that has yet hit distribution? How do you sort of find your co-founders and decide on the idea for Zynga? Is it all up and clear as day, like on day one, or is this something you guys kind of build out as you start building the first games?
Yeah, I mean, the insight of people wanting to play games with their friends was clear. The idea that there was a business model to do that as a service was not yet like something we had proven. Yep. You could see it starting to happen a little bit. There were like kind of niche virtual worlds like Habbo Hotel. You could see like people playing World of Warcraft where like there was kind of a saved state and Ultima Online, people wanted to go play these MMOs. But these were not mass market activities. They were just really popular with like some limited set of gamers. And the idea of who a gamer even was at that time was like so constrained. It was basically, a teenager male, up to in their 30s in their bedroom or their parents' house or something like this. And this idea of like making something more inclusive was not really, people didn't think these other people would buy anything or play anything. And really, I think because the content wasn't made for them, we never had a way to like prove or disprove whether or not that was even true. No one had ever run the experiment. Like the studios were very focused on building a certain type of game. For me, I had built, the first thing I built on Facebook, and the way that I got in touch with my co-founder, Mark Pincus, was I actually built a way for people to connect with their friends to play Nintendo Wii games together, which is pretty like, it's kind of funny because we ended up building a company that was about playing games with friends. But basically all it did was simply let you enter in your Wii friend code, which was kind of a new idea that Nintendo had at the time. But it was very hard to connect to the people that you actually wanted to play with. Like you couldn't really search your contact book to find those people. So if you put in your friend code, then you could see all your friends' code. It's a very, very simple app. Mark reached out to me on Facebook to talk about building apps together. And we decided to build a poker game for a very simple reason, which is just that most of the people on Facebook at the time were college kids. And it's hard to remember exactly how much of a moment it was having, but like poker was huge in 2007. It was a phenomenon. Like it was on TV all the time. ESPN was running, the World Poker Tournament, and it was like kind of a fresh thing that everybody was paying attention to at that age. And so it was kind of obvious, like let's just do a poker game where you can play and sit down with your friends automatically, and it's live, and you can chat and you can send gifts. It'll be more focused on the interactions than like a serious version of the game. And it didn't require a download. And that kind of sounds like quaint or simple now, but there were no other places on the internet you could just like play live poker on a web page. It all required some odd like plugins or downloads to the desktop that were just high friction for people. And just solving that problem where you land on a page and suddenly, like if your friend's online, you immediately land on a table. It's like magic at that point. It hadn't been done. And so once that started really working and we started figuring out, wow, there's like definitely something here. The question then became like, what games are next, right? Like how do we monetize this? And like, what should we build? Like,
and talk me through. So you've launched poker at this point, and talk me through the launch and when it really started to take off in terms of players.
Started to take off in players very quickly. So I think we launched in like June of 2007 ish.
Yep.
And I was just getting on my summer break from university, and we're launching this thing. And then by the end of the summer,
and like Facebook is literally 3 years old at this point, right? Like this is kind of a very nascent platform.
Super nascent. And it's, I would say like there's probably some special conviction we had in it. A lot of people that were early in the company were very involved with Facebook. So my co-founder Mark was one of the angel investors in Facebook with Reid Hoffman and Peter Thiel. And then a lot of the original investors in Zynga were actually social network investors like Peter and Reid and people like Fred Wilson led one of our early rounds. So these are people who are very focused on network effects. They're not media company investors. They weren't game investors. They were social platform sort of investors thinking about network effects like this. And the opportunity we saw was to build a company that was making a new type of game based on these social networks. And you could squint and you could see it with Facebook. And it's kind of funny. I don't think in 2007, we thought it would be a single social networking world where like there was just going to be Facebook that would take over everything. But it didn't actually take that long to then land on that sort of conclusion. I think it was probably more like a year or two later, maybe 2009 was when it started to become clear that Facebook was going to like really take over these regional social networks. There were a lot of platforms, like you'd go to the UK and Bebo was the number one platform for whatever reason. It was essentially like the MySpace of the UK, and you'd see Orkut in India or this other platform in Brazil. And like there were a lot of regional sort of MySpace. Yeah. And they just sort of slowly started to get taken over, where Facebook would come in the country and they'd run really solid growth plans that they'd figured out after expanding a bunch, and it would work every single time. And